let's look at irregular verbs in the conjugation are. You know that all Italian verbs are subdivided in three separate categories called conjugations. The first conjugation has verbs that end with are. The second one, there are fewer, ends with ire, and then finally there is the third one with verbs that end with ire. Okay, to be reviewed, the sound. When I say they end, where do they end? Which form ends? The verbs have very forms. It is the infinitive form of the verb. Again, let's do it the practical way. You open a dictionary and you look for the verb. We use this one very often because it is very simple and regular. The verb to love. To love. In English, we're looking not for the noun, the love that I feel. It's to love, the activity of loving. You look up the English dictionary, love, it will give you this particular symbol, which means verb. It will also tell you this little thing, T, which means transitive. Let's not be concerned with that right now. But we know that we are looking at a verb. We're looking at a translation of a verb. And it will give you the verb in its simplest possible form. Amare. Amare doesn't tell you who is doing it, when it has been done, in under what conditions, if it is in the past, in the present. It has simply the function of telling you what the action is. It is the action to love. This is the infinitive form in English with a to in front, and this is the infinitive in Italian. We separate the two parts, the last three letters, the ending, are, and all the verbs that end with are belong to what we call the first conjugation. Amare, arrivare, abitare, usare, lavorare, camminare, pensare, parlare, giocare, guardare, and on and on and on. The first conjugation is the biggest, contains the most number, the highest number of verbs. Very good. We saw, you know that the conjugation has each person we call noi, let me do it this way, loro. We saw that amare is made out of the root, and we can call the endings, we can call it the branches, I don't know, the leaves. Okay, so this means to love, and you know that each person in Italian will have a different ending. Io amo, tu ami, lui ama, noi amiamo, voi amate, e loro amano. The stress in loro is always retracted by one syllable. io amo, tu ami, lui ama, noi amiamo, voi amate, and loro amano. And it is true for all the are verbs. You know that in English you only have one change. I love, you love, he, she loves, we love, you guys love, they love. So English does not have endings that tell you who the subject is, except for this form. We know that if we encounter the verb loves, it is either he or she or it. All the other ones are identical. That's why in English you must always indicate the subject. Otherwise you don't know who is doing the action. In English you say love the cat, it could be I, you, blah, blah, blah. In Italian you can leave out the subjects. You don't need to specify what the subjects are, because the ending tells you who's doing it. Amo il cane, it can only be io amo i cani, il cane. Amano i gatti, it can only be loro. There is no other possibility. So the conjugations in Italian are more complex. They allow you to avoid using and repeating the pronouns all the time. And that's the way it is. Now, it is that way for all conjugations, all verbs that end with are. So, amare, let's say parlare. Again, you always separate the branch from the root. If you remember from the previous examples, when you have the root and you have memorized the endings, you can conjugate all the other verbs. Do you want to say that they speak? Parlare means to speak. They speak, you know, it is parla, parla, no? And this one retracts the stress, so it is parlano. If it is us, it is iamo, and it is parliamo. So no tricks, no secrets. It's a matter of memorizing two things: the procedure of splitting the root and the ending, the branch, so that you have the root that doesn't change, and then you attach the correct ending that corresponds to the person who is performing the action. Okay, now, having said that, now we're going to introduce verbs that are irregular and that we need to know. Notice that I didn't even put the subject pronouns, because we know each one of these verb forms, we know the meaning. Let's take the verb, the most important are verbs that don't conform to this particular structure, that have variations, that do not follow the rule that we have learned so far. And I should have put amare here on top. I didn't. I'll put it down here. Amare. The verbs are stare, fare, and, oh, I have to squeeze it, andare. I'll use another screen and I will repeat. Stare, which means to be, to stay. fare, to do, to make, and andare is to go. They're the most frequently used verbs in the language, and because of that, they are the ones who have the irregular forms, because they undergo such an abuse, use and abuse, and erode and change all the time, that they develop irregular forms. Anyway, let's go here. I'm going to write it smaller. Amare. And then stare. Will it fit? Yes. Fare. And andare. And you know again, amo, ami, ama, amiamo, amate, and amano. Let's look at stare. Io sto, tu stai, lui or lei sta. Noi stiamo, voi state, e loro stanno. If you look at it carefully, you realize that in this verb, the root doesn't change, and that we have some irregularities in the endings, stai and stanno. Not all the endings are irregular. Some are perfectly identical to the regular pattern, but a couple of them are irregular. We call that an irregular verb because it doesn't follow the regularity. The irregularity can be either in the root or the ending, and we'll see. Fare, faccio, fai, fa, facciamo, fate, fanno. This is more complicated because all of a sudden, well, we would expect the root to be only F, and all of a sudden we have this syllable. Where is it coming from? I'll tell you later. So, obviously, here we are dealing with something different, a phenomenon that's different. Io faccio. Again, here the root is F, and we find fai, fa. This happens to be regular, root and ending. Root, ending, look at ama, root, ending. And here we have root and ending. Facciamo, irregular. Fate, root, ending, perfectly regular. And then here again another irregular. So you look at this, faccio, fai, fa, facciamo, fate, fanno. It has to be memorized the way it is. You cannot rely on the regular pattern to tell you what the correct form of the various persons is going to be. Let's go to andare, and I hope I don't have to. Andare, I don't have to put the example here, the sample, the model. Let's go andare. Andare is irregular in many ways because it is io vado, tu vai, lui va. All these forms are perfectly irregular, unpredictable. We could not predict by looking at andare, that andare means to go, that I go in Italian would be io vado. You would imagine it would be io ando, right? Andare, io ando. No, it's completely irregular. Let's look at noi. Surprisingly, this particular person is perfectly regular. Andiamo. Voi andate. Again, another regular form. And loro vanno. I'm pointing to the regularity or irregularity just because I want you to exercise this sort of analytical ability. You look at the word and compare to the pattern, the official regular pattern, and decide yourself. But this is not the way to learn it. The only way to learn is not analytically, but simply to strictly memorize. Stare, fare, andare must be memorized entirely, as if they were the rhymes of a limerick, or if they were uh, the lines, the verses of a song or of a poem. And that's the only way. You have to practice, and you have to know which form the various persons are. It's not such a big deal. Millions of people have done it. So if you approach it simply with the perspective of, I have to memorize this thing the way it is, then you're going to memorize this thing the way it is.